Okaeri! Welcome back to my channel, Made Between the Pages. My name is Taylor, and today we are going to be doing my very, very late July wrap-up. Okay, I know we are midway through August at this point, but I got incredibly sick at the end of July and into the beginning of August. Don't worry, not COVID, I've been tested, but I had something nasty and I was basically bedridden for a week and a half. So I did not feel up to filming. But now, finally, that whatever that was is out of my system, I am excited to be able to talk to you guys about what I read in July. Now, honestly, I thought I read a lot more. I don't know, in retrospect, I was like, oh, I think it did pretty well in July. I did not. I read 5 books, and if I remember, my TBR had maybe 9, and a lot of them were high fantasy that I really do want to read, but I didn't end up getting to. However, what I did read, I really enjoyed, so that's a positive. The first book I read in July was Monstrous, Volume 4 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda, I believe. So I read the first 3 volumes in June, and then volume 4 just went over to July. And the third volume was my least favorite. I believe I gave that one 3 stars. And then 1 and 2 had been 4 stars for me. And number 4 here came in at 4 stars again. So we went back up. And what I really enjoyed about this book was how the themes presented in the first book really shine through and have some follow through in this book. The themes that I talked about in the first book were dealing with inner demons, literally and metaphorically. A lot of the characters that we really have come to love by the 4th volume were very questionable in the first volume. And the more we come to understand about them and their world, and the more that they come to understand about who they truly are, there's been some great character growth done here. This book also provided some answers that we have been waiting for since the first volume, maybe the 2nd volume. And the 3rd volume took a hit in stars because those questions still weren't answered, and it was kind of becoming too long of a wait to keep the reader interested. It just kind of became confusing. And this volume finally delivered and answered some of those questions. So for those of you who don't know, Monstrous is about this main character, Micah, and she has this demon, I guess you could say, living inside of her. In this world, there are humans and then there are arcanes, which are sometimes human-esque, sometimes not, but a being with animal characteristics and magic. There are also witches and other factions of species in this series, but those are kind of the 2 main ones, humans versus arcanes. It's very bloody, it's very war-filled because humans and arcanes are at war with each other. So that's kind of the basis for this book, and Micah is an arcane who is human passing, who grows up in this world. Overall, really enjoyed the entire series. This final volume that's out right now got 4 stars, and I cannot wait for the 5th volume. The next book I read in July was Dark Fever by Karen Marie Moning. Now, this was actually recommended to me by a cousin of mine. BookTube has done some amazing things for me, but one of those things is that it's kind of revealed people in my everyday real life who like reading that didn't know I liked reading. And so once I started making this channel, they were like, hey, fellow reader, I'm also into that shit. So my cousin is also one of those people. And she recommended this book to me with the full disclaimer that this is trash, Taylor. But I think you should read it because it's kind of enjoyable trash. And she was right. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I really enjoyed some aspects of it and really did not enjoy others, which I was warned would be the case. This book is about a party girl who's lived a very privileged. This book is about a party girl who has lived a very privileged life, and she knows it, and she's not upset about it. But one day, in the middle of sunbathing, she gets some horrible news that her sister, who is living in Ireland. Ireland. Her sister that lives in Ireland has been brutally murdered. And the investigation comes to a stop, and no one's kind of looking for her murderer at this point. So, the main character, who I also forget her name, I'm terrible with names in general, but like, this is pretty bad. Michaela, which by the way is spelled Mackayla, like, kill me now. Michaela goes to find the person who murdered her sister. And I do think that the setup of this book is supposed to be kind of ridiculous. Like, Michaela is not supposed to be relatable or likable in the beginning, which provides a lot of space for character growth throughout this book and throughout the series. So that is one of the things that I think you should be prepared for if you do go into this book. The positive things were, for the first in a series, the world building was actually really smooth. And for someone who is a fantasy nerd, obviously, world building is really important to me. And I've read a lot of books that attempt to do this in ways that don't work. But the world building in this book works. It's smooth and it is show and not tell. And it's really done in bite-sized pieces that are easy to take in. Also, this has a really trashy romance feel to it, and it's supposed to, and that aspect is done really well. Even though in this book the smut is not delivered on, and that was something that annoyed me. Like, if you're gonna ride that trashy romance aspect so hard, pun intended, you should deliver. I'm assuming it's delivered in later books though. A lot of the negative aspects for me were actually like writing style. So this book is very 90s inspired, and I'm a 90s kid. I get it. I love the 90s. Nostalgia. We love to see it. But it was overwhelming at times. There were a lot of references that were just a little bit too much in the book that kind of took me out of the world that she was doing a good job of building up until that point. The main character is also supposed to be kind of a Southern belle type character, mixed in with Party Girl. And so apparently her mother has her substitute curse words for words that aren't curse words, and that is done so in your face in the book that I wanted to throw the book against the wall. Just say the word fuck, or shit, or damn. Like, I don't need to see PG words for this. And I think it was supposed to be funny, but it was so overdone and in your face that I hated that part of the book. But because I am a sucker for, you know, smutty romances, not gonna lie, and for well done world building and interesting, like, creatures, I will read the next in this series. And my cousin was right to recommend it to me because I specifically asked her for something easy, light, you know, quick to read, and she delivered. The third book I read is The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. So I read the first two in this series. I think it's the Folk of the Air series. I think last year in 2019. I don't remember when, maybe at the beginning of the year. I was really late to this whole series, but I'm pretty sure that I read the first two last year. And so this third one, again, I'm late, but I finally picked it up from my library. And I really enjoyed it. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. Now, the main aspect of this book is the enemies to lovers aspect of Jude and Carden. I don't think that's a spoiler at this point. Pretty well known. I think that their relationship is toxic sludge. And that's okay. You can still love them. I mean, toxic relationships can be really fun to ship in books. But for me, that wasn't the main aspect of this book that I loved. The main aspect that I loved was the fairy tale aspect. Now, in this book in particular, Holly Black mentions a lot about fairy tales, and the characters reference fairy tales a lot. And I can see why, because this book follows a very, up to the last point, traditional kind of grotesque fairy tale storyline, where things don't necessarily make sense in their progression, but theme-wise they make sense. And the fantastical elements were done really, really well. The political intrigue in this book wasn't as good as The Wicked King, but it was still really well done, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it as well. I ended up taking off a star because of the ending. I'm trying to keep this spoiler-free, but I am truly okay with a tied with a bow ending. But that type of ending still has to give the reader some type of catharsis, where they feel that that ending is worthy of the time spent reading the books. And in this case, I didn't feel that way. A lot of character development time was spent, and well spent, in the first two books, building up the characters to be who they are. And the characters consistently acted on those traits established for them. Until that last point. I didn't recognize the characters that we ended with, and it wasn't because some event happened that provided that growth. The events that happened in the book should not have provided that much growth. So the end kind of left me feeling, but overall, my enjoyment of the story wasn't destroyed by that. And I think that it's a really solid series. And this final installment solidified that I'd like to have it on my shelf in my forever home one day. The fourth book I read will be a surprise to no one who's watched my vlogs. I've talked about this book a lot ever since I've read it because I can't shut up about it, and that is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. I love this book. So I read this first as an audiobook, and the narrator was amazing. And I do think that listening to the narrator was very beneficial when it comes to pronouncing, character names and place names, because this is an African-based fantasy. There were a lot of aspects of the audiobook that I felt would have been better enjoyed as a physical book, which is saying a lot because I still gave it 5 stars. This book is about a main character named Tao who is bent on revenge on the highest people in his country. I'm not going to say why he's bent on revenge because I'm staying away from spoilers, but the society in this book is very caste-based, and he is bent on revenge on the people who are at the very top of those castes. So it's an underdog revenge story. For those of you who don't know, I love Nevernight on this channel, so I'm a big fan of revenge or underdog revenge stories. What I really enjoyed about this one particularly is Tao is not especially gifted. He doesn't magically discover some powers that enable him to enact revenge. He works day after day, night after night, doing terrible, horrible things to achieve the goals that he needs. And he, as a main character, can be very frustrating because he is insanely stubborn and unable to hear advice from others. And at times, this is beneficial. Okay, hair, hello. And at times, this is detrimental. And what I really liked about Evan Winter's writing is that he doesn't change that aspect of Tao's personality to fit the storyline. He is who he is, and sometimes his actions make you want to punch him in the face, but they're consistent. And even though they're detrimental in that particular situation, it's not out of character for him. Going away from character development though, the world building in this book is fantastic. Like I said, it's an African-based fantasy, very caste-based society, and in this world, they have been at war for as long as they can remember. So it's a continuous cycle of war. So the society is based around that. And the most revered people in the society are the select few who have special abilities to help in that war. So there's a very select few group of women that can call down dragons, thus the dragons. There's also a select few group of men who can channel magic and become this gigantic fighting machine. That magic system, I think people are gonna come at me for this, but I think that this magic system is everything that the Poppy War wanted to be and didn't accomplish. The idea in this world is that the magic is taken from another realm, godlike realm, and there are extreme consequences for accessing this magic. And that aspect of this book is fed to you in wonderfully done, streamlined, bite-sized pieces. So you come away with a full understanding at the end of the novel, but you're not overwhelmed, you're not left questioning, or you're left questioning, but in really good ways. Finally, I want to add one little disclaimer, which is I loved this book, but I'm a big fan of battle scenes and military fantasy. If you don't like play-by-play, gory battle scenes or military fantasy, this book may not be for you, because we spend an insane amount of page time in the nitty-gritty heart of battles. So if that's not for you, just be aware of that going into this book. How did I spend so long talking about 5 books? But the last book that I read this month is Get a Life, Chloe Brown. Now, I'm not a huge romance reader, especially contemporary romance, but I was in the mood for something lighter, and I have seen this book praised to the heavens everywhere. And on my channel, beginning in June, I wanted to prioritize reading a book about Black joy every month. So I figured this sounds perfect. And I was right. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was so cute, so steamy, and just really enjoyable overall. The premise of this book is the main character, Chloe, goes through a near-death experience. And after this, she decides that she wants to get a life. And through the process of getting a life, she ends up meeting a guy named Red. And that is where our romance starts. I was really impressed with the way Talia Hibbert was able to balance super cute scenes with super steamy scenes. And I thought that that balance was so well done, and I really enjoyed that throughout the whole story. Also, Chloe is so relatable. There's one point in this book where she talks about being a list maker, and your girl makes lists all day, every day. I live by the list. So as soon as I saw that part of this book, I was like, I'm gonna love this character. It also doesn't hurt that Red reminds me of my boyfriend, and so I connected to his character right away. If you are looking for a book to make you smile, to make you think about, living each day to the fullest, I highly recommend picking up this book. And I 100% plan to pick up the second book in this series, hopefully this month. I only read 5 books, but clearly I had a lot to say. But finally, that concludes my July wrap-up. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, what you thought about them, if any are on your radar. I'd love to chat in the comments down below. But for now, I'm gonna head out. Jenny!